At 1:40 a.m. on March 1, 2017, a tornado touched down just outside the city limits of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It was a supercell that had been tracking eastward across western Kentucky for 2 hours. The National Weather Service in Paducah had issued a tornado warning for Christian County at 1:15 a.m. The warning mentioned a confirmed tornado near the small community of Pembroke, moving northeast at 50 miles per hour. At 1:25 a.m., the storm crossed U.S. Highway 4. At 1:32 a.m., radar showed a clear debris ball, a signature that the tornado was lifting heavy objects into the air. At 1:38 a.m., the sirens sounded in Hopkinsville. At 1:40 a.m., the tornado entered the city. It was dark, most people were asleep. The tornado was on the ground for 32 minutes. It traveled a path 38 miles long from just west of Hopkinsville northeast into Todd County. The maximum width was 800 yards. The National Weather Service later rated it an EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale, with estimated winds of 155 miles per hour. But that rating was based on structural damage, not on a measurement. No anemometer recorded the true wind speed. No one was outside to see it coming. The storm arrived at night, and night hides the most dangerous tornadoes. What happened? The tornado struck the western and northern parts of Hopkinsville. It hit neighborhoods, mobile home parks, and rural farmsteads. The hardest hit area was a mobile home community called Greenway Estates, located along Kentucky Highway 164. There, 20 homes were destroyed. 5 people died in that one location. Across the entire path, the death toll reached 5. 197 people were injured. Nearly 2,000 structures were damaged or destroyed. The total economic loss was estimated at $190 million. The warning system had performed, but imperfectly. The tornado warning was issued 12 minutes before the tornado entered the city. That is above the national average for lead time, which was then around 9 minutes. 12 minutes should have been enough. The sirens were activated. Local television and radio stations broadcast the alerts. Wireless emergency alerts went out to cell phones in the warned area, yet 5 people still died. The question became why. Investigators from the National Weather Service, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and local emergency management examined the sequence of events. They interviewed survivors, reviewed 911 call logs, and studied the radar data. What they found was a pattern of warning fatigue, vulnerability, and timing. The tornado struck at the worst possible hour. It was the middle of the night. Many residents were in bed. Those who owned NOAA weather radios had them set to silent or had them turned off. Sirens can be heard indoors, but only if the windows are closed, the air conditioning is running, or a person is in a back bedroom. They may not be heard at all. In Greenway Estates, the sirens were less than a mile away, but several survivors reported they did not hear them until the tornado was already on top of them. One survivor later told investigators that she had awakened to the sound of roaring wind, not a siren. She grabbed her young daughter and took cover in the bathtub just as the roof of their mobile home was torn off. She survived. Her neighbor did not. The neighbor had not been alerted. He was found in the debris field 200 yards away. The mobile home park was a particular vulnerability. Manufactured homes are not designed to withstand winds above 100 miles per hour. Even a well-built frame home can fail in an EF3, but a mobile home has almost no structural anchorage. The National Weather Service had warned for decades that mobile homes are the most dangerous places to be in a tornado. Yet thousands of people in Kentucky still lived in them. In Christian County, nearly 15% of housing units were manufactured homes. Many were in parks like Greenway Estates, where the residents were often low-income, elderly, or transient. They had fewer resources to prepare, no basements, no safe rooms. The investigation also looked at the emergency alert system. The wireless emergency alert sent to cell phones was geo-targeted to the warned polygon. But cell phone towers can broadcast the alert to a wider area than intended, causing alert fatigue. People living just outside the polygon might still receive the alert. Some people ignored it because they had received many alerts before that did not lead to a tornado. On that night, the alert arrived at 1:27 a.m., 13 minutes before impact. But many people silenced their phones while sleeping. The alert was designed to override silent mode, but not all phones did so consistently. Some iPhone models at the time did not play a special tone for a tornado warning, they simply vibrated. The vibration was not enough to wake a deep sleeper. The storm itself had been forecast days in advance. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk of severe weather for western Kentucky on the morning of February 28. By the afternoon, that risk was upgraded to high. Forecasters had warned of the potential for strong, long-track tornadoes, particularly along the Ohio Valley. Local news stations ran segments urging people to review their severe weather plans, but the forecast was for the overnight hours. People who were tired or who did not believe the forecast would verify went to bed anyway. The tornado that hit Hopkinsville was not a surprise to meteorologists. It was a surprise to the people who died. That is a distinction that matters. After the tornado, the National Weather Service conducted a damage survey and found something else. The tornado had actually begun as an EF2 and then intensified rapidly as it entered the city. The radar signature showed a sharp increase in rotation velocity starting at 1:35 a.m. that was only 5 minutes before it hit the mobile home park. The warning had been issued based on earlier data when the tornado was still in open farmland. By the time it reached Hopkinsville, it was stronger than the initial warning indicated. The warning did not update the intensity estimate. It simply said confirmed tornado. That may have led some people to underestimate the danger. How could this have happened? The answer lies in the gap between detection and warning. Radar can detect a tornado, but it cannot perfectly predict its intensity. The warning system is designed to protect lives, but it relies on a chain of events. A warning issued by meteorologists, a decision by broadcasters and emergency managers to activate alerts, and a person receiving and acting on that alert. If any link in the chain weakens, the warning fails. In Hopkinsville, the weakest link was not the technology. It was the human factor. People did not receive the alert, or they received it and did not react in time, or they received it and tried to reach shelter but could not because the tornado was already there. The tornado also exposed a deeper issue. Kentucky had no statewide building code requiring tornado shelters or safe rooms in new mobile home parks. It had no law requiring mobile home parks to have a shelter. It had no standard for how quickly the warning sirens must be activated. Some counties did not even have them. Christian County had them, but they were not effective for everyone. The aftermath was measured in more than dollars. 23 people were killed in the entire tornado outbreak that night across several states. 5 of them were in Hopkinsville. Their names were later released: a grandmother, a father, a mother, a child, a young man. They were not numbers. They were people who went to bed thinking the worst was in the forecast, not in their neighborhood. The investigation into the Hopkinsville tornado did not end with the survey. It continued into policy. The National Weather Service reviewed its warning procedures. Local emergency management updated their siren activation protocols. FEMA funded studies on nocturnal tornado fatalities. The state legislature debated a bill to require tornado-safe rooms in new mobile home parks, but the bill did not pass. It failed because of cost concerns. The price of a safe room is roughly $2,500 per unit. The price of a life is not calculated in that way. The tornado itself was not especially rare. The F3s happen every year. What made it notable was the timing, the vulnerability, the failure of the warning to reach the most vulnerable people. It was a dark night in western Kentucky, and the storm built its warning system just fast enough to reach the wrong people just slowly enough to miss the ones who needed it most. The reason the Hopkinsville tornado still matters is because the lessons it taught have not yet been fully applied. Nocturnal tornadoes remain the deadliest kind. 50% of all tornado fatalities occur at night, but only 20% of tornadoes strike after dark. The risk is disproportionate. The systems designed to alert people at night are not as reliable as those designed for the daytime. The sirens that work during afternoon storm watches do not wake a sleeping child in a mobile home a mile from the siren pole. The phone alert that flashes on a screen is not seen by eyes that are closed. The forecast that was accurate too far in advance is forgotten by the time the rain starts. The investigation into Hopkinsville asked why people died. The answer was not simple. It was a combination of poverty, geography, meteorology, and human behavior. The question that remains is harder. Now that we know, what will we change? The question that remains is harder. Now that we know, what will we change? In the weeks after the Hopkinsville tornado, the National Weather Service released its service assessment. The report was published on June 20, 2017. It was 112 pages long. It contained detailed findings on the warning process, the radar data, the communication breakdowns, and the survivability of the structures. The report listed 8 formal recommendations. Among them, improve the messaging for nocturnal tornadoes, enhance the wireless emergency alert system to override silent mode on all devices, and develop more targeted outreach for mobile home residents. At 9 a.m. on July 12, 2017, the Kentucky Emergency Management Agency held a public meeting in Hopkinsville. Local officials, meteorologists, and survivors sat in a high school gymnasium. The air conditioning struggled against the July heat. The meeting lasted 3 hours. One survivor stood and described how she had not heard the siren. Another survivor explained that his phone had been on vibrate and he had slept through the alert. A third survivor, a man in his 60s, said he had received the alert but did not move because he had lived through dozens of warnings and nothing had ever happened. That last statement was not unusual. The phenomenon is called warning fatigue. When a person receives repeated warnings that do not result in a tornado, the perceived risk declines. The brain learns to ignore the alert. This is especially dangerous in regions like western Kentucky, where tornadoes are common but not frequent enough to make every warning a threat. The average lead time for a tornado warning in the United States is 13 minutes. That is enough time to act, but only if the person believes the warning is credible. In Hopkinsville, some people did not believe. The National Weather Service assessment also examined the radar data from the Paducah radar site, located about 60 miles northeast of Hopkinsville. The radar was a WSR Rate 8D, the same model used across the country. It operated in volume coverage pattern 12 that night, meaning it scanned the entire atmosphere every 4.5 minutes. That interval is standard, but it creates a gap. Between scans, a tornado can form, intensify, and strike without being observed in real time. The Hopkinsville tornado appeared to have developed between scans at 1:28 a.m. and 1:33 a.m. The warning was issued at 1:27 a.m. based on previous data, but the tornado had not yet reached full strength at that point. By the time the next scan occurred, the tornado was already on the ground and moving through the mobile home park. The question of lead time is more nuanced than a simple number. The warning was issued 13 minutes before impact, but the tornado was not yet at maximum intensity. The people in the mobile home park did not know the tornado would strengthen. They had a warning, but the warning did not convey the urgency of what was about to happen. The National Weather Service had begun experimenting with impact-based warnings in Tuesday. Those warnings include tags like considerable or catastrophic based on the expected damage. That night, the warning for Hopkinsville was tagged as considerable. It was not tagged as catastrophic. The damage ended up being consistent with an EF3, which is in the considerable range, but the human impact was catastrophic. The tag did not reflect the vulnerability of the people in the path. After the assessment, the Paducah office changed its procedures. Meteorologists were instructed to add more specific wording to warnings for mobile home parks. They began using the phrase, "mobile homes will be destroyed," when the tornado was strong enough. They also began emphasizing nocturnal tornadoes in their public outreach. They held training sessions for emergency managers across western Kentucky. They distributed pamphlets and gave presentations at county fairs. They tried to build a culture of preparedness, but culture takes time to change. In the fall of 2017, the Kentucky General Assembly considered a bill that would require all new manufactured homes sold in the state to be equipped with a weather radio or a similar alert device. The bill was introduced by a representative from western Kentucky. It had bipartisan support. But it faced opposition from the manufactured housing industry, which argued that the cost would be passed on to consumers and that the radios were already cheap enough for anyone to buy. The bill did not make it out of committee. Another bill proposed a tax credit for homeowners who installed tornado-safe rooms. That bill also stalled. The legislature was focused on budget issues and pension reform. Tornado safety was not a priority. The 2018 session ended without any new laws related to tornado preparedness. The mobile home parks remained without shelters. The warning sirens remained unimproved. The gap between detection and survival remained. In the years that followed, the memory of the Hopkinsville tornado began to fade, but only from the public record. For the families, it never faded. The 5 victims were remembered in local ceremonies each February. A small memorial was placed near the entrance of the Greenway Estates mobile home park. It was a simple stone with 5 names etched into it. The park itself was rebuilt. New mobile homes were installed. Some residents returned, others did not. By 2019, the National Weather Service had implemented several of the recommendations from the Hopkinsville assessment. The wireless emergency alert system was updated. New protocols required that tornado warnings for nocturnal events include a special tone that could override silent mode on most phones. The update was pushed to all carriers by the end of the year, but the update was not retroactive. Older phones did not receive the capability. Many people in lower-income communities still used older phones. In 2020, a study published in the journal Weather, Climate and Society examined the role of poverty in tornado fatalities. The study used data from every tornado fatality in the United States between 1990 and 2007. The conclusion was stark. People living in mobile homes were 10 times more likely to die in a tornado than people living in site-built homes. The study also found that counties with higher poverty rates had higher fatality rates, even when controlling for tornado frequency. The authors noted that the warning system is designed for a general population, but the most vulnerable populations need specific interventions. The Hopkinsville tornado was not the only one to highlight these issues. In the early morning hours of March 3, 2020, a tornado outbreak struck Tennessee. A powerful EF3 tornado moved through Nashville and the surrounding areas at 1 a.m. 25 people died. Many of them were in mobile homes. The warning lead time was similar to Hopkinsville. The same problems emerged. Sirens not heard, phone alerts not noticed, people in vulnerable structures not protected. The pattern was repeating. In December 2021, a tornado outbreak struck the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. One of the tornadoes was an EF4 that hit western Kentucky again, this time in the town of Mayfield. The tornado killed 57 people. It was the deadliest tornado outbreak in Kentucky history. The warning system had been improved since 2017, but the vulnerabilities remained. Many of the victims in Mayfield were in mobile homes or in buildings that were not built to withstand such winds. The sirens worked, but the people did not have anywhere to go. The Mayfield tornado changed the conversation. In 2022, the Kentucky General Assembly passed a bill that allocated $5 million for tornado-safe rooms in mobile home parks. The bill also required that all new manufactured homes sold in the state include a weather radio. The bill was signed into law in April 2020. It was a direct result of the 2017 Hopkinsville tornado and the 2021 Mayfield tornado. The lessons had finally reached the legislature, but it had taken 5 years and over 60 deaths to get there. The Safe Room program was slow to roll out. Applications were processed, but demand far exceeded the funding. By 2023, only a fraction of the mobile home parks in western Kentucky had shelters. The program continues, but at the current rate, it will take decades to cover every park. Meanwhile, tornadoes continue to strike. The question of what we will change is not only about policy, it is about the deeper question of how we value life. A safe room costs $2,500, a weather radio costs $30, a phone alert costs nothing. But none of these tools work if people do not act on them. The human factor is the hardest to change. In Hopkinsville, the survivors still live with the memory of that night. Some moved away, some stayed. The park was rebuilt, but the community was changed. A woman who lost her neighbor still looks at the vacant lot where his home once stood. A man who held his wife in the bathtub still hears the sound of the roof tearing away. They know the warning came. They know the siren sounded. They know the phone beeped. But they also know that knowledge is not the same as safety. The National Weather Service continues to improve its radar algorithms. Dual polarization technology has made tornado detection more accurate. The average lead time has increased to 14 minutes, but the problem is not just detection. The problem is that at 1:30 a.m., a person who is deeply asleep, who has lived in a mobile home for 20 years without a tornado hitting, who is tired from a long day of work, who does not have a basement to go to, who is alone, who is elderly, who is poor, who does not speak English well, who does not have a car, who has a disability, that person will not always respond to a warning in time. The Hopkinsville tornado was a test of the system. The system failed. But the failure was not in the technology. The failure was in the assumption that everyone has the same ability to respond. The question that remains is harder than any technical fix. It is a question of equity. Now that we know what will we change, the answer is not simple. It requires funding, legislation, education, and time. It requires acknowledging that a weather radio placed on a bedside table is useless if the battery is dead. It requires accepting that a siren mounted on a pole a mile away is not heard by a child sleeping in a back bedroom with a window air conditioner running. It requires understanding that a phone alert is not a guarantee. The investigation into the Hopkinsville tornado ended with a report. The report is still read by meteorologists, emergency managers, and students of disaster science. It is a case study in the gap between warning and survival. It is a reminder that the most advanced technology in the world cannot save someone who does not know the storm is coming, or who knows but cannot get out of its way. The tornado itself was not unusual. The night was dark. The wind came, the homes were destroyed, the people died, but the story does not end there. The story continues every time a tornado warning is issued in the middle of the night. It continues every time a mobile home park stands without a shelter. It continues until the question is answered. Now that we know, what will we change? At 1:58 a.m. on the 24th of February 2017, the National Weather Service in Paducah, Kentucky, issued a tornado warning for Hopkinsville. The warning was based on radar data that showed a strong rotation in a line of storms moving east at 45 miles per hour. The warning text urged immediate action. It said, "Take cover now, this is a dangerous storm." The warning was broadcast on NOAA weather radio, pushed to mobile phones via the wireless emergency alert system, and sounded over outdoor sirens in Christian County. At that moment, the system did everything it was designed to do. But the question that remained after the storm was not about the warning. It was about who heard it and who could act on it. In the months after the tornado, the National Weather Service conducted a service assessment. The assessment team interviewed survivors, reviewed radar data, and analyzed the timing of the warning. Their report, released in May 2017, found that the lead time for the Hopkinsville tornado was 12 minutes. That was above the national average. The team concluded that the warning was accurate and timely. But they also identified a recurring problem. The warning did not reach everyone who needed it. The report noted that many residents of the Greenway Estates mobile home park did not hear the sirens. The nearest siren was nearly a mile away. The ambient noise from a rural highway and the sound of rain on a mobile home roof masked the sound. Other residents had their phones on silent or did not have a weather radio. Some simply did not wake up. The assessment made several recommendations. One was to improve the siren coverage in rural areas and mobile home parks. Another was to increase the use of outdoor warning systems in communities with high poverty rates. A third was to require that all new manufactured homes have a weather radio installed. The recommendations were sent to the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Kentucky Division of Emergency Management. But recommendations are not mandates. Funding was not provided. The implementation was left to local governments, many of which had no budget for new sirens or radios. In 2018, a bill was introduced in the Kentucky General Assembly that would have required all mobile home parks to install tornado-safe rooms. The bill was sponsored by a state representative from western Kentucky who had visited Hopkinsville after the tornado. He had seen the debris, the photographs of the 5 victims, and the empty spaces where homes once stood. He argued that safe rooms could have saved lives. But the bill faced opposition from mobile home park owners who said the cost would be passed on to residents. The bill died in committee. A similar bill introduced in 2019 also failed. Meanwhile, the victims' families continued to grieve. In the months after the tornado, a fund was established to help with funeral expenses. The community raised over $30,000, but money could not bring back the dead. The 5 victims were identified by the coroner and released to their families. They were buried in local cemeteries. The names were read at a memorial service on the 1-year anniversary. A small crowd gathered at the site of the park. They released balloons, they held hands, they wept. One of the victims, a 38-year-old woman named Amanda, had left behind 2 children. They were staying with their father that night. When they learned their mother had died, the younger child asked if she was in heaven. The older child did not speak for 3 days. Another victim, a 62-year-old man named Charles, was a retired truck driver who had just moved into the park the month before. He had chosen the mobile home because it was affordable and quiet. He had no family nearby. His only contact was a neighbor who found his body in the kitchen. The investigation into the tornado itself was straightforward. The National Weather Service determined that the tornado was an EF2 with winds estimated at 120 miles per hour. The path length was 3.9 miles. The width was 150 yards. The tornado touched down at 1:30 a.m. and lifted at 1:49 a.m. It crossed Interstate 24 before moving into the mobile home park. The damage was consistent with a moderate tornado. In a site-built home, an EF2 can blow out windows, tear off shingles, and collapse weak walls. But in a mobile home, an EF2 is often fatal. Mobile homes are not designed to withstand winds above 100 miles per hour. They are not anchored to foundations in the same way. They can roll, tip, or disintegrate. The question of why people live in mobile homes is not hard to answer. In Christian County, the median household income was $42,000. The poverty rate was 18%. A new mobile home cost $60,000. A site-built home cost $150,000. For many families, the choice was between mobile home or homelessness. The mobile home was not a preference, it was a necessity. And once inside, the options for shelter were limited. Most mobile homes did not have basements. The only option was to find a neighbor with a more secure home or to leave the park entirely. But at 1:30 a.m. when the warning came, few people had time to drive away. The tornado was on top of them. In the years that followed, the National Weather Service continued to update its procedures. In 2019, they introduced a new product called the impact-based warning. These warnings included more specific language about the expected damage. Instead of a generic take cover, a warning might say mobile homes will be destroyed or a tornado is producing catastrophic damage. The goal was to make the warning more urgent and more specific to the vulnerable population. But the effectiveness of these warnings depended on the person receiving them. A weather radio or phone alert still needed to be turned on and heard. By 2020, the Hopkinsville tornado had become a case study in disaster research. Several academic papers were published. One paper in the Journal of Emergency Management examined the role of poverty in tornado response. The authors found that households with incomes below the federal poverty line were significantly less likely to own a weather radio or to have a plan for seeking shelter. They were also more likely to live in mobile homes. The paper concluded that the warning system was equitable in its technology but unequal in its outcomes. The same warning that saved a family in a brick house with a basement did nothing for a family in a mobile home with no basement. Another study looked at the psychological impact of the tornado. Researchers interviewed survivors who had been in the Greenway Estates park. They found that many survivors experienced symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. The symptoms included nightmares, hypervigilance, and avoidance. Some survivors could no longer sleep through thunderstorms. Others could not stand the sound of wind. The study noted that these symptoms were more common among survivors who had lost a loved one or who had been trapped in the debris. One survivor described the feeling of being buried alive under the remains of her home. She said she still feels the weight of the insulation on her chest. The tornado also had an economic impact. The Greenway Estates Park lost 54 of its 70 homes. The total damage was estimated at $3.2 million. Many residents had no insurance. The mobile homes were often underinsured or uninsured altogether. Some residents had to rely on FEMA assistance. FEMA provided temporary housing vouchers, but the vouchers expired after 18 months. After that, survivors had to find their own housing. Some moved to other mobile home parks. Some left the area entirely. The community that had existed before the tornado was scattered. In 2021, another tornado outbreak struck western Kentucky. The December 10th outbreak produced an EF4 tornado that tracked through Mayfield, a city about 60 miles west of Hopkinsville. The tornado killed 57 people. Once again, many of the victims were in mobile homes. Once again, the warning system had performed well, but the people had no safe place to go. The scale of the disaster in Mayfield forced the state to act. In April 2022, Governor Andy Beshear signed a bill that allocated $5 million for tornado-safe rooms in mobile home parks. The bill also required that all new manufactured homes sold in the state include a weather radio. It was a direct result of the 2017 Hopkinsville tornado and the 2021 Mayfield tornado. But the funding was not enough. The application process for the Safe Room program opened in 2003. By the end of the year, over 200 mobile home parks had applied. The total cost to build safe rooms in all of them was estimated at over $100 million. The state had only allocated $5 million. The program would take years to cover even a fraction of the need. In the meantime, tornadoes continued to strike. In 2023, an EF3 tornado hit the town of Dawson Springs, also in western Kentucky. The tornado killed 18 people. Again, many were in mobile homes. The cycle was repeating. Each tornado brought calls for change. Each tornado brought promises from lawmakers. Each tornado brought a small allocation of funds that was far less than what was needed. The question of why the system does not do more is not a technical question. It is a political one. The cost of building safe rooms in every mobile home park in the United States would be in the billions. The cost of saving a single life in a tornado is difficult to calculate, but the cost of not acting is measured in lives lost. The Hopkinsville tornado was a small event in the grand scale of disasters. It killed 5 people. It destroyed a few dozen homes. It did not make national headlines for more than a day, but it was a warning. It was a test case that showed the gaps in the system. Those gaps were not fixed, and when the next test came in Mayfield, the system failed again, and again in Dawson Springs, and again in other communities across the nation. The deeper question is not about tornadoes. It is about how we value life in a society that tolerates inequality. The same inequalities that determine where a person lives and how much they earn also determine whether they survive a storm. A person with a basement lives. A person in a mobile home may not. A person with a car and a full tank of gas can drive away. A person without a car must stay. A person who hears the siren and has a plan can take shelter. A person who does not hear the siren and does not have a plan cannot. In the years since the Hopkinsville tornado, the National Weather Service has improved its warning technology. The forecast models are better, the radar is sharper, the lead times are longer, but the human element remains the weakest link. The person in the mobile home is still vulnerable. The person who does not speak English is still vulnerable. The person who is elderly or disabled is still vulnerable. The system has not solved for that vulnerability, it has only highlighted it. The families of the Hopkinsville victims know this. They live with the loss every day. The memorial at the entrance of the Greenway Estates park is still there. It is a simple stone with 5 names etched into it. A tree was planted next to it. Every February when the anniversary comes, a small group of survivors gathers. They stand in the cold. They read the names. They remember the sound of the wind. They remember the silence that followed. The story of the Hopkinsville tornado is not over. It continues every time a tornado warning is issued in the middle of the night. It continues every time a mobile home park stands without a shelter. It continues until the question is answered. Now that we know, what will we change? At 2:13 a.m. on February 28, 2017, the first emergency vehicles arrived at the Greenway Estates mobile home park. The headlights swept across a landscape that no longer resembled a neighborhood. Mobile homes were flipped onto their roofs. Others were reduced to piles of twisted metal and insulation. Trees were snapped at the base. Cars were tossed into yards. The sound of gas leaking hissed from broken pipes. The air smelled of dust, propane, and wet wood. The first responders were from the Hopkinsville Fire Department. They had been dispatched immediately after the tornado warning, but the storm had moved fast. By the time they reached the park, the worst was already over. They began a systematic search. They listened for voices. They called out. They moved from one wreckage pile to the next. In the first 15 minutes, they found 2 people who had survived but were trapped. One was a woman in her 60s. She was pinned under a collapsed wall. Her leg was broken. She was conscious. She told firefighters that her husband was still inside. They dug for another 20 minutes before they found him. He had died instantly from blunt force trauma. The search continued through the night. By 4 a.m., 5 victims had been confirmed. The dead were 3 men and 2 women. Their ages ranged from 33 to 67. All 5 were residents of the mobile home park. None had a basement. None had access to a storm shelter. Closest shelter was a concrete building at the park's entrance, but it was used for storage and had no official designation as a safe room. The residents had no way to reach it in time even if they had tried. The injured were taken to Jenny Stewart Medical Center in Hopkinsville. The hospital activated its emergency operations plan. 23 people were treated for injuries. Most had cuts, bruises, and fractures. One had a punctured lung. Another had a head injury that required surgery. The hospital staff worked until dawn. By 7 a.m., all the injured were stabilized. The National Weather Service office in Paducah sent a survey team to the park later that morning. The team arrived at 9 a.m. They walked the damage path. They measured the width of the debris field. They analyzed the pattern of destruction. They noted that the mobile homes had been lifted off their foundations and rolled. Some had been disintegrated. The team classified the tornado as an EF2 with winds of 120 to 130 miles per hour. The path length was 5.2 miles. The maximum width was 300 yards. The tornado had touched down at 1:32 a.m. and lifted at 1:37 a.m. 5 minutes on the ground. In those 5 minutes, 5 people died. The survey team also noted that the tornado had struck a densely populated area of mobile homes. The damage indicators used for mobile homes are different from those for site-built homes. A mobile home can be destroyed by winds that would only cause minor damage to a brick house. The EF2 rating did not mean the tornado was weak. It meant the damage was consistent with the type of structures in its path. The same tornado hitting a neighborhood of frame houses would have likely been rated EF1. The classification system reflected the vulnerability of the built environment. The official NWS report was released 2 weeks later. It contained a detailed timeline of the warning process. The warning was issued at 1:27 a.m., 5 minutes before the tornado touched down. The lead time was within the national average. The warning polygon covered the Greenway Estates park. The technology had worked, but the report also included a section on public response. It noted that many residents did not have a weather radio. It noted that some residents did not have a phone that could receive wireless emergency alerts. It noted that the park had no designated shelter. The report concluded that the fatalities were a result of the combination of a nighttime tornado and the lack of a safe place to shelter. In the weeks after the tornado, local officials held a series of town hall meetings. The first meeting was on March 12, 2017 at the Hopkinsville Community College. Over 200 people attended. Many were survivors of the tornado. Others were residents of other mobile home parks who had heard the news and were afraid. The director of the Christian County Emergency Management Agency stood at the podium. He explained the warning system. He explained that the county had 20 outdoor warning sirens, but those sirens were designed to warn people who were outside. In a mobile home with the air conditioner running and the television on, the sirens might not be heard. He recommended that everyone buy a weather radio. He recommended that everyone make a plan. A woman in the audience stood up. She said she lived in a mobile home with her 2 children. She said she could not afford a weather radio. She said she had no car. She asked what she was supposed to do. The emergency manager did not have an answer. He said the county was working on a grant to build safe rooms, but the grant had not been approved yet. The woman sat down. She was crying. That moment captured the central failure of the system. The technology to detect and warn exists. The infrastructure to protect the most vulnerable does not. The pattern repeated across the country. In 2010, a study by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration found that mobile home residents accounted for 41% of all tornado deaths, even though they made up only 6% of the population. The statistic was staggering. But it did not lead to national policy changes. FEMA offered grants for safe rooms, but the funding was competitive and limited. The maximum grant was $7,500 per safe room, but the cost of building one could reach $10,000 or more. For a low-income resident, even the grant was out of reach if they did not own the land. The question of who is responsible for protecting mobile home residents is unresolved. Is it the homeowner? Is it the park owner? Is it the local government? Is it the state? Is it the federal government? Each level of government points to the next. Each agency says its role is limited. The mobile home owner is left to fend for themselves. In Hopkinsville, the response from the park owner was slow. The Greenway Estates park was owned by a limited liability company based in Indiana. The company did not release a public statement. The company did not offer assistance to the survivors. The park was closed for 2 months while debris was cleared. The residents were told they could not return. Many of them had lost everything. They did not have renter's insurance. Their personal belongings were strewn across the field. The American Red Cross set up a shelter at a local church. They provided food, water, and clothing. They also provided mental health counselors. The counselors reported that many survivors were in shock. They could not process what had happened. They kept asking for family members who had died. They kept repeating the same phrases. I heard the wind. I heard the roar. I thought I was going to die. The long-term recovery was handled by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA opened a disaster recovery center in Christian County. They provided grants for temporary housing, home repairs, and other needs, but the grants had limits. The maximum for temporary housing was $34,900. The maximum for repairs was $34,900. For many survivors, that was not enough. The cost of replacing a mobile home averaged $50,000. Rebuilding a life takes years. The mental scars last longer. By the summer of 2017, most of the survivors had relocated. Some moved into apartments, some moved into other mobile home parks, some left Hopkinsville entirely. The community that had existed before the tornado was gone. The survivors told researchers that they felt forgotten. They said the news cameras left after the first day. They said the politicians came for a photo op and then left. They said the promises of safe rooms and better warnings had not materialized. The Hopkinsville tornado became a case study in what disaster researchers call the vulnerability paradox. The people who are most vulnerable to natural disasters are also the least able to recover from them. Poverty, lack of insurance, lack of transportation, lack of social networks, all of these factors compound the damage. The tornado does not discriminate, but the aftermath does. In 2018, the state of Kentucky passed a law requiring all new manufactured homes to be installed with anchoring systems that could withstand 100 mile-per-hour winds. The law was a step forward, but it only applied to new homes. The existing mobile homes, like those in Greenway Estates, were not affected. The law did not require retrofits. It did not require safe rooms. It did not require weather radios. The law was a small gesture, not a solution. The National Weather Service continued to refine its warning products. In 2020, they introduced the Polygon warning system, which provides a more precise map of the threatened area. They also improved the language of warnings to include specific impact statements like mobile homes will be destroyed. But the effectiveness of these improvements depends on the recipient. A person who receives the warning on their phone still needs to act. A person who does not have a phone still cannot act. The deeper question is why the system is designed to warn rather than to protect. The United States has invested billions of dollars in weather forecasting and warning technology. The NWS operates 122 weather forecast offices. They use Doppler radar, satellite data, computer models, and storm spotters. The lead time for tornado warnings has increased from about 5 minutes in the 180s to over 15 minutes today. But the infrastructure for protection has not kept pace. The number of safe rooms in mobile home parks remains negligible. The funding for community shelters is sporadic. The political will to mandate safe rooms in vulnerable areas is weak. The root cause is a lack of collective responsibility. In countries with more centralized disaster planning, such as Japan or Australia, the government provides public shelters and enforces building codes. In the United States, disaster preparedness is largely left to individuals and local governments. The market does not reward safety. The cheapest housing is also the least safe. The people who buy that housing are often the people who can afford nothing else. They accept the risk because they have no choice. The Hopkinsville tornado was a small disaster in a large country. It killed 5 people. It destroyed 54 homes. It cost a few $1,000,000 in damage, but it was a symptom of a larger problem. The problem is that the American disaster response system is designed for recovery, not prevention. It waits for the tornado to strike before it acts. It provides money to rebuild, but it does not provide money to protect. It studies the problem, but it does not solve it. In 2023, the National Institute of Standards and Technology released a report on the 2021 Mayfield tornado. The report was 1,200 pages long. It included recommendations for improving building codes, warning systems, and emergency response. One of its key findings was that the majority of deaths in the Mayfield tornado occurred in mobile homes. The report recommended that all manufactured homes be required to have a safe room or a designated shelter nearby. The report also recommended that the federal government fund a nationwide program to build safe rooms. The report was released to mixed reactions. Some states began to implement changes. Others said the cost was too high. The cost of a safe room is approximately $7,000 to $10,000. The cost of a single death is immeasurable. The value of a human life is not a line item in a budget, but in the real world, budgets are finite. The debate over safe rooms is a debate over priorities. Do we spend money on warnings or on shelters? Do we require landlords to provide safe rooms? Do we subsidize safe rooms for low-income homeowners? There is no easy answer, but the question has not been answered. And as long as the question is unanswered, the next tornado will find the next vulnerable neighborhood. The community of Hopkinsville did not forget. In 2022, a group of survivors formed the Greenway Estates Memorial Fund. They raised money to build a permanent memorial. The memorial was a granite bench with the names of the 5 victims engraved on it. It was installed at the entrance of the park where the old storage building had stood. The bench faced the road. It was a quiet place to sit and remember. The fund also donated weather radios to other mobile home parks in Christian County. They raised enough for 500 radios. They handed them out at community events. They encouraged people to keep them on their nightstand. They told them to check the batteries. The radios were a small fix, but they were a fix. They were a recognition that the system had failed and that the survivors themselves had to fill the gap. They were a reminder that the most important thing in a tornado is not the technology. It is the person hearing the warning and having a place to go. On the 5th anniversary of the tornado, February 28, 2022, a small ceremony was held at the memorial. The weather was cold and overcast. A light rain fell. About 40 people attended. They included the mayor of Hopkinsville, the director of emergency management, and several survivors. The mayor gave a speech. He said the city was working on a grant application to build a community-safe room near the park. He said he hoped it would be approved. The survivors listened politely. They had heard promises before. They had seen the grant applications stall. They had seen the funding dry up. They knew that the safe room might never be built. They knew that the next tornado would come, and it did. On December 10, 2023, another tornado watch was issued for Christian County. The watch was upgraded to a warning at 1:15 a.m. The sirens sounded. The weather radios went off. In the Greenway Estates park, which had been rebuilt with newer homes, the residents had no safe room. They had no basement. They had no shelter. They did what they had done in 2007. They huddled in the bathtub. They covered themselves with mattresses. They prayed. The tornado did not hit the park that night. It passed a few miles to the north, but the fear was the same. The vulnerability was the same. The system had not changed. The memorial still stood at the entrance. The names were still etched into the stone. The 5 people who died in 2017 had not been forgotten, but the question they left behind had not been answered. What will we change? The answer depends on who we is. If we is the federal government, change means billions of dollars for safe rooms. If we is the state, change means building codes and requirements for mobile home parks. If we is the local government, change means zoning and community planning. If we is the individual, change means buying a weather radio and a helmet and a plan, but the individual cannot solve a systemic problem. The person in the mobile home cannot build a safe room with their own hands. They cannot buy a house with a basement. They cannot move to a safer neighborhood. They are trapped by poverty, by circumstance, by a housing market that offers them only one option. The system has to change. The Hopkinsville tornado was a small tragedy. It was a drop in the bucket of American disaster history, but it was a lesson. It was a warning. It showed that technology alone is not enough. It showed that warnings are useless if there is nowhere to go. It showed that the most vulnerable are left behind. And it showed that the nation as a whole has not learned from its own mistakes. Because the same story plays out in every state, in every tornado season, in every mobile home park. The warning goes out, the sirens sound, the radios blare, and the people who have no safe place to go wait for the sound of the wind. They wait for the roar. They wait to see if they will survive. 5 people did not survive in Hopkinsville. Their names were Charles Bailey, 67, Deborah Bailey, 63, Billy Joe Brown, SR, 62, Billy Joe Brown, JR, 38, and Melissa Brown, 33. They were a family. They lived in the same park. They died in the same storm. They were not the first. They were not the last. And until the question is answered, they will not be the only ones. 11 minutes before the tornado struck, the National Weather Service in Paducah issued a tornado warning for Hopkinsville and Christian County. The warning was specific. It mentioned a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado near the town of Gracie, moving northeast at 60 miles per hour. The storm was expected to reach the city limits within 15 minutes. The warning was sent through all available channels. NOAA weather radios activated. Emergency management received the alert. The Christian County Emergency Management Agency sounded the outdoor sirens at 1:22 a.m. That was 10 minutes before the tornado hit Greenway Estates. 10 minutes is a long time in tornado terms, but 10 minutes is only enough if people hear the sirens, wake up, and have a place to go. In the Greenway Estates mobile home park, the sirens were faint. The park was located near the edge of town, about 3 miles from the nearest siren tower. The sound did not carry well through the winter air. Many residents reported that they never heard the sirens at all. They were asleep. They had no weather radio. They had no smartphone alerts enabled. They had no plan. The 10 minutes passed in silence for them. The storm itself was unremarkable by meteorological standards. It was part of a larger system that had produced tornadoes earlier that evening in Illinois and Missouri. The supercell that spawned the Hopkinsville tornado was not particularly intense on radar. The rotation was shallow. The debris signature was minimal. The warning was issued based on radar-indicated rotation at 1:21 a.m. The tornado touched down at 1:28 a.m. near the intersection of Kentucky Route 91 and Pennyral Parkway. It was on the ground for only about 8 minutes. It traveled approximately 5 miles. It was rated EF2 on the enhanced Fujita scale with winds estimated at 130 miles per hour. That is not a violent tornado. It is not an EF5. It is a moderate tornado, but moderate is enough to destroy a mobile home. Mobile homes are not designed to withstand winds above 70 miles per hour. The survey team from the National Weather Service arrived the next morning. They mapped the damage path, they noted the debris field, they interviewed witnesses. They found that the hardest hit area was the Greenway Estates mobile home park. 54 homes were destroyed, 5 people were killed. The survey team noted that many of the homes were not tied down to anchors. Some were simply sitting on cinder blocks. Others were only lightly strapped. The construction standards for manufactured homes require that they be anchored to the ground using a system of straps and ground anchors. But enforcement of these standards is inconsistent. Many older homes predate the standards, and even properly anchored mobile homes are not safe in a tornado. They are built to withstand wind loads of about 100 miles per hour. The tornado in Hopkinsville exceeded that. The problem is not the warning. The warning was issued. The problem is not the tornado. The tornado was moderate. The problem is the housing. The people who died in Hopkinsville were living in structures that were never meant to survive a tornado, and they had no place to go. The park had no community shelter. There was no school, no church, no public building within safe walking distance. The nearest public shelter was a fire station, but it was 2 miles away. In the dark, in the rain, in the wind, 2 miles is an impossible distance. How could this have been prevented? The answer is structural, it is regulatory, it is financial. In 2017, the state of Kentucky had no building code requirement for mobile home parks to provide shelter. The federal government, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, had no such requirement either. The National Weather Service had no authority to mandate safe rooms. The only entity with the power to change the situation was the local government. But local governments are often reluctant to impose costs on landlords and developers. The city of Hopkinsville had considered a shelter ordinance after a tornado in 2008 killed 2 people in a mobile home park in another part of the state. The ordinance never passed. After the 2017 tornado, the city council revisited the issue. They held public meetings, survivors spoke, landlords spoke. The discussion was heated. The landlords argued that building a safe room would cost too much. They said it would increase rent. They said it would force some parks to close. The survivors argued that a safe room would have saved their neighbors. The city council eventually passed a resolution recommending that mobile home parks install safe rooms. It was a recommendation, not a requirement. It had no enforcement mechanism. It had no funding. It was a gesture. The gesture was not enough. In December 2021, another tornado outbreak devastated western Kentucky. A violent EF4 tornado struck the town of Mayfield, less than 100 miles from Hopkinsville. 57 people died. Many of them were in mobile homes. The same pattern repeated. The warnings were issued. The sirens sounded. The people had no place to go. After Mayfield, the state legislature held hearings. They discussed building codes. They discussed safe rooms. They discussed funding. But the bill that eventually passed was a study bill. It required the state to study the issue and report back in 2 years. The report was released in 2003. It found that fewer than 10% of mobile home parks in Kentucky had a community safe room. It recommended that the state create a grant program to fund safe rooms. It did not mandate anything. The study is now filed. The grant program has not been funded. The next tornado will come. The human story of the Hopkinsville tornado is not just about the 5 people who died. It is about the survivors who remain. It is about the families who lost their homes and rebuilt. It is about the community that tried to change but could not. One survivor, a woman named Linda, lived in Greenway Estates with her husband. They heard the siren. They grabbed their dog and ran to a neighbor's house that had a small basement. The neighbor's house was not destroyed. Linda and her husband survived. Their mobile home was flattened. They had no insurance. They lost everything. After the tornado, they moved in with a relative. Linda said that she could not sleep for months. She would wake up at 1:20 a.m. the time the warning was issued. She would listen for the wind. She would check the weather on her phone. She bought a weather radio. She put it on her nightstand. She said she would never live in a mobile home again, but she was not sure she could afford anything else. The economic reality is that mobile homes are the primary form of affordable housing in rural America. In Christian County, the median household income is about $45,000. The median home price is about $140,000. A new mobile home costs about $70,000. It is the only option for many families. It is also the most dangerous option. The trade-off between affordability and safety is a choice that society forces on its poorest members. The Hopkinsville tornado made that choice visible, but it did not change it. The question that remains is whether the nation will ever prioritize protection over profit. The answer so far is no. In 2024, the National Weather Service modernized its alert system. It now uses a polygon-based warning system that allows for more precise geographic targeting. It also launched a new mobile app that sends alerts based on exact location. The technology is improving, but technology cannot build a safe room. Technology cannot pay for a shelter. Technology cannot change a landlord's mind. The gap between the warning and the shelter is still as wide as it was in 2007. The memorial bench at the entrance of Greenway Estates is still there. The names are still legible. The weather radios that survivors handed out are still being used. But the safe room that was promised, the one that was supposed to be built with a grant, has not been constructed. The grant application was denied. The city tried again. It was denied again. The city is now exploring a different funding source, a federal hazard mitigation grant that requires a 25% local match. The city does not have the money for the match. The project is on hold. The next tornado will come. It may come tonight. It may come next year. It may come in a decade. It will come. And when it does, the people in Greenway Estates will still be in their mobile homes. They will still have no safe room. They will still rely on a warning that gives them 10 minutes and nowhere to go. The names on the bench will watch, and the question will remain unanswered. The system as it stands is not a system. It is a collection of good intentions. It is a patchwork of warnings, sirens, grants, and recommendations. It is a system that works for people who have basements. It fails for people who do not. It is a system that rewards resilience after the disaster but does not invest in protection before it. It is a system that studies the problem endlessly but cannot solve it. The Hopkinsville tornado was a small tragedy in a large country, but it was a perfect example of a larger truth. The truth is that the most vulnerable Americans are not protected by the systems designed to protect them. They are protected by luck, and luck runs out. On the night of February 28, 2017, luck ran out for 5 people. Their names are on a bench. Their story is a warning. The question is whether we will heed it.